Hello.
Oh. Well, if John doesn't get here right away, we can just start reading the blog that I sent you.
Yep.
Let's do that and go down to the one that says, Isthmo-Colombian.
Yep.
Yeah. So do you see that picture?
Like the very first one?
Right. Yeah, the very first one.
Yep.
Do you see that the thing in the middle, little like light blue, whatever, and then it has a green. It says Isthmo-Colombian is right, in a sense, northern South America and Central America, sort of.
Right. Yeah, I see that.
So you can see what we're talking about. Then those different colors that are on the map, that's actually the language.
Okay.
Chibchan languages, just to show that the reason that the area is all, in a sense, one unit, really relies a lot on the language.
Ah.
Do you see that?
Okay.
How the language is both in the areas of North South America, but also in Central America.
Right.
And then if you also notice, it also touches or is inside of a part of what became the Incas.
Okay.
You see that?
Yeah, that's kind of that. So the map
purple
that it's inside of kind of shows that where the Inca is, right?
Correct. The purple is the Inca, and it shows the brown cultures, which is the Chibchan languages going into that area.
Okay.
I'm just saying, showing things are more connected, as all I was trying to,
Yep. Yeah, it's like so there's circles drawn on the map, but it's not like people weren't together there that spoke different languages on the edges, right?
Well, right, yeah, exactly. Right, because just like even if you have seats of power, like the thing is talking about down here, where the different shaman seats, which would have to do with probably authority too, and I think later also deities sit on seats. And so to me, though, you can see the whole area, though, where the seats are is generally kind of like close to where they were being found. And just shows the whole area is kind of, even in the Caribbean, right? You see, it's really all related.
Right, yeah. They're clearly using, similar kind of structures for their seats, right?
Correct. So you can see that, there's a similar, the reason that they're colored, it's because the shapes are thought to, like, in a sense, represent the same things. But then look at the languages right down there. That little thing that shows, where the languages are, where the light blue is down at the bottom.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And it's the purple, for the land, and then it has green for the language. So you can get a picture of, hey.
Hello.
Good to have you.
Good to see you.
That's good. Yeah. There you go.
So I really appreciate you coming, John. And today's really going to be just about you, in a sense, and also Central and South America and the Isthmo-Colombian, connection, and then the language connection of was it Chibchan? Chibchan, yeah, languages. So I think that I wanted to have you just go crazy and tell us, what would you like to say about all this? Because I read the two books that you produced. I thought they're both amazing.
It's quite a chunk. It's like 1,600 pages altogether.
Yeah.
With a lot of pictures. The nice thing is there are lots of pictures.
Well, yeah, there was lots of pictures, definitely. And but I liked, of course, the one that kind of does, like, how I kind of try to see the world, in a sense, like all of it together. Like, how does all of this relate? That's
Yeah. Well, those big picture things are among the things that fascinate me as well, and they're really important things to think about. I actually organized a symposium several years ago, the title of which was "The Center of the Americas," in which I made the argument that the Isthmo-Colombian area on which I focus really is the center of the Americas. If you're looking at a map of the Western Hemisphere, it's right there in the middle. And I've focused mostly on the mainland in that area between Honduras and Colombia, which sits between the Mesoamerica culture area to the north, which is where the Aztecs, the Mayas, the Olmecs, the Toltecs, the Zapotecs, all of those groups were. And also the Andean culture area to the south, which is where the Incas and all of their predecessors were situated. But in fact, the Isthmo-Colombian area intersects also with the Antilles, the Greater Antilles and the Lesser Antilles and the whole Caribbean basin,
Right.
and also northern South America, because it includes northern Colombia, which extends over towards Venezuela. And then that connects with the Orinoco Valley, which is a major corridor into the Amazon, and is also the homeland of the Arawakan-speaking peoples, who are the main language group that you find throughout Amazonia. So the Isthmo-Colombian area and that sort of whole circum-Caribbean area is one that intersects with all of the major culture areas of the Americas. In fact, if you include the Gulf of Mexico with the Caribbean, people were probably traveling by canoe up into the Gulf of Mexico, and then from there northward into the Mississippi River system, which is the longest river system in the world. If you combine the Mississippi and the Missouri together, leads all the way up into North America. It's larger than the Nile. It's Nile is number 2 after the Mississippi-Missouri combination. So with the Mississippi and Missouri in the north, and the Orinoco and the Amazon in the south, it really becomes a crossroads for everything that was happening in the Americas.
Well, I totally agree. And that's why I thought that, it was important to address this. I wanted to do the things on mounds and pyramids and stuff, but my goal was actually to then start talking about the Americas, because I feel like there's so much, there that's important, and so much that people don't know. And it's absolutely, especially like the part you're working on. There's not really any videos online you can watch that say.
No, sadly, and I was thinking about that. I think the one that I did with Flint Dibble a few weeks ago is about the closest that comes to it, and we just included a small part in that. But you're absolutely right, and the thing is that the part of the Americas that I focus on is not very well known, even to those people who are specialists in the Americas. Even to my colleagues who work in Mesoamerica or the Andes. They just don't know this area especially well. And a bit of my history. We've talked about it before, and we can go into that again if you want. But I was really drawn to archaeology in part because I was first drawn to things that were kind of weird and obscure and esoteric.
Right.
And then once I began getting into archaeology, I began realizing, oh wait, there are these parts of the Americas that are sort of weird and esoteric that nobody knows about. And so I've always been drawn to that. I always wanted to be the one person who was sort of a specialist in something that nobody else knew anything about. Just because somebody needs to do it, but also because it was an intellectual challenge. It was something that was very appealing as kind of a puzzle to focus on, and something that I felt that I could really contribute something to the world by pushing the frontiers of knowledge and bringing things into people's consciousness that they never even had considered existed before.
I absolutely agree. And I do appreciate you doing that. And like I told you online, I feel like you're a science champion. We need people out there that constantly defend science and show why not only is it, necessary, but it's also can be fun, could be interesting, can be, help you see the world in a lot more accepting way. Because I know that before I looked into mythology and stuff, I had a very bigoted view of the world. It was actually learning all these different things, and then I started, wait a minute.
Yeah, it's very mind expanding, because people unfortunately can get sort of boxed into what they grew up with and what they know around them. And I think it's a big accomplishment when people are willing to look at other parts of the world and say, oh yeah, I'm kind of interested in finding out what happened in China, or what happened in Mongolia, or what happened in Brazil, or other types of places. And the world is huge. There's a lot to see and to study. And something I found really enjoyable is that I never have stopped learning. I mean, I'm 65 now. I've been doing this since high school. I've never gotten bored. I've never run out of things to look at. I've always felt, oh yeah, here's something else I can dig into, and I've never run out. I've never gotten to the point where I felt like, oh, I know everything. I better find some other career because I figured this one out and I'm ready for something else.
Right.
And I think that probably does happen with some people in some careers. And I don't mean to put down anybody's career, because everything is worthwhile. But I really do feel that there are probably people who get to a certain level as master carpenter, and they've pretty much figured out how to make anything they want to make in carpentry. Yeah, there are always new tools and always new materials, but it is easy to become a master of your trade. And there's a lot to be said for that. But if you master it while you're in your 30s, then you've got another 30, 40 years during which, there might not be a whole lot more to master beyond that. Now, I'm probably being unfair. There are people who spend their whole lives and never feel like they quite get as far in carpentry as they would really like.
Yeah, it's all a perspective, because for me, every time I learn something that is revolutionary to my thinking, it's like I feel like it helps me propel, higher. Like I've heard someone say before, I stand on the, shoulders of giants or whatever. Every time I get something, then it helps me see a little more. And it's amazing how I look back and I felt so confident before.
Right.
And then now that I have even a better perspective, now it was still maybe okay, but not as good as I thought, or it was different than I thought. So yeah, I constantly think, even things I think I already know, I keep looking, keep wanting to understand. That's also why I appreciate you constantly doing and stuff and inspiring people. And also why I personally take it really offensive when people were attacking you or other archaeologists or scientists. It really makes me mad. And I know that, you guys don't want, in a sense, people to go out and, I guess, attack them for doing it. But it really...
And we really don't. That's not something we want anybody to do.
Well, no, I understand. I'm just saying, I wasn't talking about physical anyways. I mean, just like...
Well, but the reason why that becomes relevant is that there are some people who do want people to do that. For example, our favorite guy, Graham Hancock, just recently said, on his Twitter feed, how much he likes Ben Urban and Dan Richards, who are exactly attack dogs, who go after people who he disagrees with.
Yeah, well, and I don't. Those people are not credible people at all. I mean, like I said, to me, even if they felt that they had a different opinion than you, or even than another archaeologist, the fact of the direct and character assassination attacks, I don't know. It should be illegal, like criminal.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm saying is, if something is true, I understand.
Right.
But to just to say, I mean, you can't. My point is, you can't just go out and say rape, and it's not true.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I mean,
well, but there's a term for it that I learned a while ago. It's a good term: rage baiting. Okay, rage baiting is one of those things that gets just people riled up. They want to get into it. They want to fight with somebody on the internet. And I think a part of it is just we have these ancient juices in our endocrine systems where we get a charge from getting angry or from getting defensive or from getting into it with someone else. And that's a very deep thing that goes way back into our lizard brains or our deep evolution. All you have to do is watch other animals and see how that works.
Yeah.
Dogs or cats or whatever it happens to be. But we are mammals, and like mammals, we have these kind of defensive tendencies, and we like to bare our teeth, and we like to show our dominance and all of that type of stuff. And I think this rage baiting online sort of feeds into that. And it's one of those things that actually, people will pay for. I mean, people will subscribe to a service specifically so that they can get the emotional enjoyment from watching someone get pummeled. And, I can sort of relate to that at a certain level. I mean, prize fighting is a thing, and professional wrestling is a thing, and, football is a thing. I mean, people enjoy watching these physical contests. And I think it's totally fair for them to enjoy watching intellectual contests as well. I wish more people did. The problem is it's not an intellectual contest. It's becomes like schoolyard, I know I am, but what are you? Or I know you are, but what am I? Or, all the back and forth, and you are too, and so are you. And it just doesn't have any intellectual depth to it at all, none whatsoever. And in fact, I'm on a Facebook group that's called something like Discussion of Graham Hancock's Ancient Apocalypse. And that's the title of the Facebook group. And I keep posting in that Facebook group, I say, does anyone want to have a discussion? Does anyone want to discuss the content? Do you want to have an intellectual discussion of the ideas?
Nah.
Or do you just want to sling things back and forth? It becomes a food fight. There's no meat to it. And as you well know, there's plenty of meat in these things. I mean, we can go to whatever depth you want to go to.
Well, I do want to go to depth. So can you tell us, because you talked about as an expert, I have an interesting thought. What was it like the first time you got to South America as an archaeologist new, and or were you already experienced before you started doing that?
No, not at all. Well, I mean, I got into archaeology because I had a girlfriend in high school who was interested in archaeology. And so I thought, okay, my girlfriend's interested in this. I'm going to find out some more about it. But she was the one who introduced me to Chariots of the Gods by Eric von Daniken. She was the one who first got me thinking about kind of Atlantis and ancient civilizations. And I realize now, it's been a long time, that part of the reason she was into that stuff was because she had her father had remarried, and she had some older half brothers and sisters who were like 6 to 8 years older than she was. And they were exactly the same age that Graham Hancock is. I mean, they were, right in the thick of the baby boom. And so they were paying attention to this stuff in the 60s and 70s. And we were a little bit younger, but she was learning about it from them and then kind of passing it on to me. And it's like, okay, yeah, this is kind of cool. Let's see what this is. So, I began getting into this when I was a sophomore in high school, freshman and sophomore in high school. And I didn't know anybody else who was into it at all, really, except for, well, I take that back. My mother was very much interested in ancient Egypt. And part of that was part of her own kind of spiritual growth and exercise. She was interested in something called the Ancient and Mystical Order of the Rosicrucians, the Rosicrucians, AMORC. You used to see ads for that in the back of magazines and things like that. Anyway, she was into that. So we had that stuff around the house when I was growing up. But anyway, I started reading about archaeology in high school. And then what really did it for me was the summer that I graduated from high school. My grandparents, my dad's father and mother, knew that I was interested in archaeology, and my grandfather was interested in archaeology also. So as a high school graduation present trip, whatever, they took me to Mexico. Okay, so the summer after I was in high school, we went to Mexico. We went to Teotihuacan, and we went to Monte Alban, and we went to the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City, which is just mind-blowing. We went to Chichen Itza, we went to Uxmal and these other places. And I was just entranced by the whole thing. I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And this was 1976, so you could still climb the pyramids back then. Wow. I mean, a lot of them they've closed them off because they don't want people climbing on them. But back then, I climbed to the top of every pyramid. It was just amazing. That's awesome. So yeah, it was mind blowing. It was very cool. And I was headed off to college, and it really wasn't. I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. My initial ambition was to be a science fiction writer, but when it came to going to college, I had to think of what it is that I want to do, and I, for some reason, didn't realize that going to college you could go to college and be a writer. So I thought you had to pick a particular field or something to study, some kind of major, and I didn't want to be an English major, so I picked archaeology because I just thought it was the coolest thing. So I actually started college as an archaeology major. And I actually think the reason I got into the college I did was because they had just started this special interdisciplinary archaeology major, and they wanted students for it. So I think that's how I got into Yale, even though I went to, you know, first grade through 12th grade in Baltimore City Public Schools, which in the 1960s became pretty rough and ready places. In fact, by the time I was a senior in high school, my high school was 98% black. I was one of the only few white kids in the school. But I was really interested in these things. I was just reading about them on my own. And then when I got to college, I could take courses in it, which was great. And I really wanted to get out into the field and sort of try something. And so I went to one of my professors and I said, you know, how can I go about doing this? He says, well, what are you interested in? I said, well, I'm really interested in Central America. And I wasn't using the right language. I should have said, I'm really interested in Mesoamerica. Okay, because Mesoamerica is the term that they use for the Aztecs and the Mayas and all of that.
Right. I know what you're talking about. Well, a lot of people don't realize this in North America. They say Central America, and that's actually not right.
Yeah, well, and people think that South America means south of America, but that's not right. You know, there's Mexico is not South America. You know, Costa Rica is not South America. South America is a whole other continent.
Yeah.
But anyway, the funny thing was that I went in and talked to this particular professor, and I said, I'm interested in Central America. He said, oh, Central America. And then he kind of reached over to his desk and he said, look, I just got this mail from an archaeologist in Costa Rica. And he's finding some really interesting stuff. And why don't you write to him and see whether he's got some opportunities for you? And so I did. And the guy in Costa Rica wrote back and said, yeah, I'd love to have you come work with me. Come on down. And basically what he said is, if you can get the airfare together, that's all you need to worry about. We'll take care of your housing. We'll take care of your room and board. If you can just get here, we'll find something for you to do. And so, you know, I'd written to a few other places, but this was the only place that really wrote back to me. So I got a small grant, and I remember very clearly it was for $600. $600 for my entire budget for that summer. And I put all of everything that I thought I needed into a backpack, and I headed down to Costa Rica. And it was one of the best summers of my life. I was 19 years old.
Yeah.
I had a little bit of Spanish from high school. I had not studied Spanish in college at all. So I just had high school level Spanish. I'd never been a place where I'd had to speak Spanish before, except just traveling in Mexico. But 2 days after I arrived in Costa Rica, having met this archaeologist, we drove way the hell out in the country. I mean, we went, it was a 6-hour drive to get to the field location that we were going to work in. And it was like something out of a movie. In fact, there was this bridge we had to cross at one point, which was actually, there was not a bridge for cars. There was just a railroad bridge. It kind of went off and went around a curve. And you had to lay planks between the rails in order for a car to go. But you had to know what the train schedule was, and you also had to send somebody down the tracks, because you couldn't start driving if a train was coming, because otherwise you'd be stuck on this railroad bridge when the train was coming. So anyway, it's just crazy stuff. I mean, just driving on these wooden planks between the rails over this river. Anyway, it was like something out of Indiana Jones. Although Indiana Jones did not exist at that time. People often say, oh, did you get interested in archaeology because of Indiana Jones? It's like, no, Indiana Jones got interest because of me. I was, the Raiders of the Lost Ark came out in 1981. I had graduated from college in 1980. So I'd had an archaeology major for 4 years before Indiana Jones came along. But anyway, what made it a cool experience was that it was out in the middle of, I don't want to say nowhere, because there were people who lived there. It was out in the middle of the tropical rainforest. In order to get to the archaeological site where we were working, we actually had to park our 4-wheel drive vehicle and walk for 2 kilometers beyond the closest we could get in the vehicle, because it was all rivers and swamps and things like that.
And then we think that there's an archaeology site, meaning that people were there. Enough people to leave an archaeological footprint.
Right. Well, that's right. Well, but it was one of these places that had been pretty heavily populated long before the Spanish got there. And then there had been a population decline. And it was a part of the country that hadn't really been very well developed, except for some banana plantations. And there was a railroad that went through there. But it was really pretty far out there. And we lived in a little house that had no indoor plumbing. We just had an outhouse. It had no electricity, so we had to use lanterns and candles. And we were there during the rainy season. So every afternoon, like clockwork, at about 2 or 3 in the afternoon, it would just pour down torrential rain. And what made it mostly fun and tolerable is that one of the guys working for us was the local weed dealer. and he would get out his stash, and we would sit and watch the rain from 3 until whenever in the evening, and then we get up the next morning and do some more digging. And it was I at 19, that was for me like the best thing I could do. It was really, we were finding really cool stuff. We were excavating some really interesting house foundations. We were finding pottery and stone tools and all kinds of other things. I was hooked. It was just a fantastic experience. And it pulled on all of the things that I really loved, including hiking and camping, being outdoors, hanging out with people who were very different from me. Just the insects and the bugs and the monkeys and the lizards, everything was just crazy. But this was 1978. Okay, what people need to understand is that Costa Rica was a completely different place in 1978 than it is now. The roads were terrible. It was really pretty impoverished in most of the country. There were not telephones in most places. We actually had to hike for a couple of kilometers to get to the closest payphone.
Wow.
I mean, it was really pretty underdeveloped. People think about Costa Rica today, and it's kind of high-end tourism.
Yeah.
And in fact, this place that it took 6 hours to get to in 1978, you can get there in like 2 hours, maybe less, an hour and a half on a paved high-speed highway.
Right.
So it's changed. And I remember thinking back then, man, once they get the roads in this place, it's really going to take off. And that's what happened. Is once they were able to build the roads, then everything else kind of followed from it. But even then, in the early 1980s, there was not a lot of tourism in Costa Rica. That didn't really begin happening until the late 80s. And
speaking of roads, did you find any roads? Because I know there's definitely a lot of roads in the Amazon, isn't there?
There are, and that's one of the things that they're finding a lot of with LiDAR. And in fact, yes, we did find some roads. And in fact, that's one of the things that I had focused on in one of my projects was these footpaths and roads that went from the coast up into the mountains. And in fact, Costa Rica was probably crisscrossed by these footpaths and they were, we call them roads, but they didn't have any animals. They didn't have horses or donkeys or mules until the historic period. It was all foot traffic. But they had these very well-established footpaths. And I didn't really appreciate what a landscape without cars and animals, well, cars at least, was like until I went to Nepal in 2000, where most of Nepal is still a pedestrian country. In fact, there was not a car in Nepal until 1950. That's how recent it was.
Wow.
So their carbon footprint is pretty low then.
Their carbon footprint is pretty low, even though they had this like 25 million people or something like that. But yeah, I think the first car they got there was because the king of Nepal wanted to have a car, so he had all the parts brought in, and then they assembled it in Kathmandu.
Wow.
It was crazy. But anyway, but you see and appreciate what a pedestrian landscape is like, and we don't really experience that anymore.
No.
We don't know what that's like unless you maybe go up in the Appalachians or someplace that's really kind of way out there. But in a well-occupied landscape where there are lots of people, these footpaths get very well established. It's how everybody gets across the landscape. And so they'll pave them, they'll put rocks down, they'll build rope bridges, all of these different ways to get across streams and valleys and things like that.
Doesn't that make commerce also, like, trade and
Yes, of course, absolutely. Yeah, people carry whatever it is that they're carrying, whether it's fish, and you can actually, you can carry fish to within a day of wherever you get the fish. Fish will keep for a day or two sometimes, depending on what the fish is. So the maximum distance that you could carry a fresh fish is where people were eating fish. But then there were also things like obsidian that they used for making projectile points, or flint, or other stone materials for making various things. So you begin thinking about how does this stuff travel across the landscape. And that was one of the things that I thought was really cool about Costa Rica, is because it's not a big country. It's only about the size of West Virginia, but it has a coast on the Caribbean, and it also has a coast on the Pacific. So you can literally, in theory, walk from the Caribbean to the Pacific in the space of less than a week. And there actually are some places in Costa Rica. One of the places I've been to up in the mountains, there's a place called Mount Chiripo, which is the highest peak in Costa Rica, where standing on top of this mountain, you can literally see the Caribbean and the Pacific at the same time. You look one direction, there's the Caribbean, turn around, there's the Pacific, and you're literally standing on top of the continental divide, which is amazing. I mean, and it's sort of, I joke, it's kind of the opposite of Kansas, where I live now, which is about the farthest you could get from either the Atlantic or the Pacific Ocean.
Right in the middle.
Yeah, right in the middle. Right. And in fact, if you open Google Earth without changing any of the other parameters and just zoom all the way in, you wind up just a few blocks from my house.
Crazy.
Yeah, well, it was intentional. It was an Easter egg put in there by Brian McClendon, who invented Google Earth. And he actually made the center of Google Earth is his graduate school apartment. And it's still there.
Wow.
So anyway, it was this appeal of this very unusual landscape, and trying to imagine what it was like for the people who lived there, and understanding how it was that people lived in an incredibly rich environment. I mean, there's, if you in Costa Rica, if you've got a pair of flip flops and some gym shorts and a machete, you're set. You don't need a whole lot more than that. It doesn't get cold enough, and well, depending on where you are, it doesn't get so cold that you really need to cover up at night or anything like that. It doesn't get so hot that you're really super uncomfortable, except maybe a couple hours in the middle of the day. But there's fish, there's fruit, there's stuff to collect, there are roots. I mean, you can really get an appreciation of how it was that people were able to live there without necessarily putting a lot of time and attention into agriculture. I mean, they did, but they were always able to hunt. They were always able to fish.
What did they do? Agriculture. The corn at a certain point. Did they also have potatoes?
They didn't have potatoes in Costa Rica, but they did have a whole bunch of different root crops. They had something called manioc, which is what you make tapioca out of. Cassava is another variety of that. They also had a bunch of other root crops that just kind of grow these big underground corms and rhizomes and tubers, and all of those are good to eat. So they're potato-like things, although they're not specifically potatoes. But root crops, tree crops, palm fruits, deciduous fruits, lots of different. I mean, the biodiversity there is just incredible. It's just amazing how many different species are there.
Yeah. So, did you focus on a specific culture when you were down there?
Well, it wasn't so much focusing on specific cultures as it was on particular problems, very, very specific problems. One of the things that I got very interested in, and this is actually what I wrote my doctoral dissertation on, was when and how and where did people make the first pottery?
I'm interested in that also.
I got very interested. I got very interested in pottery and how pottery has affected people's lives and the world and everything else. And it's kind of an interesting question. I can explain exactly why I think it's so interesting. but it became my focus for a long time, was figuring out, and I became sort of a specialist on the earliest pottery in the Americas. When and where and how did this develop? But the analogy that I use, I find people are really good at thinking in metaphors, and in terms of understanding technology and other types of things. And the very first human technology, the very first things that people made were stone tools. Okay.
Right.
And mostly chip stone tools. Okay. Things that for cutting and slicing and scraping. Well, what does cutting and slicing and scraping? Well, our teeth. Okay. Our incisors, our molars for grinding. But stone tools became an extension of our teeth. Okay. So chopping tools are really an extension of our incisors. Grinding tools are an extension of our molars. Okay, so all of which are used for processing foods in order to be able to make it easier to eat.
Right.
So basically, one way to think about stone tools is as an externalization of human digestion. Okay, animals that don't use tools are limited to being able to eat those things that they can bite and chew with their teeth, right? Okay, because animals don't use tools except maybe chimpanzees to get termites and soak up water and things like that. But anyway, stone tools are an extension of our mouth, an extension of our teeth. They're that's what they do. Pottery is an externalization of our stomachs. Okay, so that things that you can't normally digest in your stomach because they're too toxic, or because they're too rough or too harsh, too hard, too difficult to digest, or because they contain toxins, which can be, different types of toxins like tannins and things like that, or because they have bacteria, because they've gone bad, because they're beginning to rot. Well, your stomach can't handle that, and if you eat those things, then you wind up with vomiting and diarrhea. Your body says no. But if you can put it in a pot and cook the hell out of it, you can kill the bacteria. You can get rid of the toxins. You can take foods that otherwise would not be edible, and you can digest them before you eat them, in order to make them edible.
Right.
And so the use of a combination of stone tools, chopping, grinding, and then pottery for digesting, really opened the door in terms of what it was that humans were able to consume. Lots more different kinds of foods, lots more foods that we otherwise would have thrown away that we could make useful. And so basically you're improving human nutrition. And not only are you improving nutrition for people like you and me, but you're also improving nutrition for babies and infants, and you're improving nutrition for old people.
Children, old people, yeah.
So by improving nutrition, you're automatically greatly expanding that population curve.
Well, I was thinking, to me, because I know that we didn't have dental, so a lot of people probably missing teeth, like you're talking about elderly, and having food digestible would be a big deal. I mean, it could be life
absolutely.
and death.
That's right. That's exactly right. And when you increase the survival of babies, you increase the size of the population. That's just simple math. If you increase the lifespan, if you make it easier for old people to get to eat and to survive, then you also increase the population. But you also increase other things, which is by keeping the old folks around longer, you can learn from them. You're actually extending what your knowledge base is, because you're able to learn from people who have seen it before, who've been through it before, who remember that 100-year flood, or who remember what to do during a drought. And so you can benefit from knowledge that otherwise wouldn't have survived. So anyway, part of my interest in pottery was because of the way that it affected human survival, and the way that it affected what it was that people could eat. But I also realized, and this is also kind of a slippery slope that we got into, unlike stone tools, unlike projectile points or grinding tools, you can make those without having an impact on your environment that much. I mean, the rocks are there, you pick up the rocks, you modify the rocks and make the tools, and you're ready to go. Pottery requires fuel. Pottery requires heat. In order to fire a pot, you need to burn some wood. So the making of pottery and the using of pottery, because once you've got a pot, you've got something you can cook in. But making pottery, which needs to be fired, and then cooking with pottery, which is requiring fuel as well, put us on this slippery slope that started with wood and charcoal, and now has us with fossil fuels and nuclear power. The whole need for more and more and more and more heat and heat energy. And just look at what's around you right now. Everything we've got, the plastic on my headphones, the metal in my glasses, the every material in my computer here, the computer screen, glass, all of that requires heat to make. So ceramics, pottery, is the beginning of heat technology. It's the beginning of the use of heat to make new materials that people didn't have before. And actually pottery becomes really the first artificial material that people ever made. The first thing that there was an anthropogenic, human-made new material that didn't exist in nature. Granted, it does exist in nature because you get fires on clay, yeah. but when you're shaping it and making something, you really are making something that didn't exist in nature before. So that was another thing that was really interesting to me.
So where would you say somewhere in South America, as North South America, like Brazil or whatever, Venezuela, as the origin of pottery?
Yeah, well, that's where we find the earliest pottery in the Americas is found near the mouth of the Amazon in Brazil. It was found by an archaeologist named Anna Roosevelt in the 1980s. Actually, it was found in the 1920s by I think his name was A. Hyatt Verrill, who was excavating in shell mounds. And he actually found it, but he didn't write about it. He didn't say anything about it, except some minor mentions here and there. Well, Anna Roosevelt goes back to his sites and does some additional excavations and finds some additional pottery that winds up dating to 7,000-8,000 years ago, which is the earliest
time almost of the shell mounds show up.
Yeah, well, that's right. Around the time the shell mounds show up, but it's also the pottery in the Americas is even older than the pottery in the Middle East. Okay. Göbekli Tepe and all of those sites are called pre-pottery Neolithic because they didn't have pottery.
But there is pottery in Turkey that is 10,000 years old at that Baka, whatever, I can't remember now.
Yeah, that's right.
And then Alicia Hoyek also has pottery, also probably related to that. And the DNA relates, and then Chattel Hoyek gets pottery. And all those are N1C, and N1C is the one that goes into Europe and all the way to I think it's 7,000 something becomes the linear black pottery culture in Germany.
Yeah, you know your stuff, Damien. That's good.
Oh yeah. Well, just like I knew where the pottery was in the Americas, but as you know, my thing, I never was into anything like ancient aliens. Never was. I was into religion because of being raised, but I never believed really that much. In fact, even one of my things I did when I was first became an atheist is I wasn't sure if there was ghosts. I didn't believe there was. I just saw no evidence. It didn't make any sense that natural only evolution would somehow turn to magic. That didn't make sense to me. But I went to a ghost, haunted house supposedly at night, and they said, whatever you do, don't say bad things. So I said bad things the entire time, hoping that anything would happen. And when it didn't, I left that house sure there was no such thing as a ghost. But other than that, my thing is like an accidental towards archaeology. I never said, oh, I'm going to learn archaeology. I went to college to be a counselor, especially I wanted to do addiction because I had it at 17. I had liver failure from alcohol and doing, cocaine, and I had a really hard life. Anyways, so I wanted to help juvenile delinquents also because I was one. I was expelled from high school, sent to a continuation school. I barely got educated. I was so uneducated that when I joined the Job Corps, just to do welding, they made me go back to high school because they said, you don't know anything. But so what happened for me is then because of, in a sense, not knowing anything, and then I got this new perspective when I went to college, I started realizing, wow, all this stuff that I had been thought before of the world, like as a Christian, is just built on fantasy. And that like made me feel very uneasy. Like, I don't know anything now. I don't trust anything. So my thing has just been an endless search for the truth. I just want to know what's true. And so that's why I told you.
I'm sorry for those notifications I keep getting. Are you getting that chime?
That's fine. I hear it.
Nothing's coming through.
That's what got me into archaeology. I started seeking in college. Just wanted to be into, because I had all this new stuff. I took 2 religious courses. It was really the second religious course on the Bible where they mentioned archaeology. They showed that archaeology shows that the Bible's flood story, there's actually older stories. That blew me away. What? I mean, so learning archaeology in that sense helped me become an atheist. And then it was because I learned to become an atheist because, in a sense, because of archaeology, I had that, like, as a persuasion, like, that's the way to go. Everyone else seems to care about the myths. I want to know about who these people are, the data, the stuff. And then the more I learn, like I said, I just get getting more and more willing to learn more and to feel more wonder. Just and then I now have a lot of ideas about things, but that's actually because of years and years and years of looking and looking and looking.
Yeah. Well, ignorance is curable.
Yeah, it is. And so I was just saying that I know that other people I feel don't, like I said, say enough about how good what you're doing. But I, as someone who has gone on both sides, total ignorance, where I couldn't even pass high school, to learning so much, it's just, I really appreciate people that are trying to get this stuff across. It's so important.
Yeah, and it's so accessible these days. I mean, this is the irony, is that we've got all this stuff right at our fingertips. It's really not that difficult to find. No,
but it takes effort. People don't want to do it, and so that's why I said I appreciate you doing that constantly. It's needed. Education is so important. Like I've said before, to me, education is like a lifeline to reason, because that's what it certainly was for me. I went from complete ignorance and then all of a sudden learn stuff, and it's made me think more.
Right. Oh, that's good. That's what the brain is for. And actually, to continue the analogy, the metaphor that I was using before, if we go from teeth, first we externalize our teeth in stone tools, then we externalize our stomachs in pottery. Then we externalize our arms and our legs in tools and in vehicles and things like that. We are now in the phase of human existence where we are using computers and AI to externalize our brains. That's the next step, is actually to get external technology to think for us, which is not necessarily a good thing. I mean, it does follow this pattern that we've followed with externalizing everything else. But I don't think it's necessarily a good thing when people are not thinking for themselves. If they just rely upon AI to do it and then thinking that that's true or correct, it's just not working. And my son is a musician. I think I've given you links to some of his songs. And he was telling me that he was playing around with sort of feeding his music into AI and seeing if it could generate something similar to what he'd composed before. And he says it's all just garbage. He says none of it is any good. I mean, the AI can write music, but it's just really shitty music.
Well, and I agree. For me, I do a lot of art, and I would love for AI to do it for me. But unfortunately, my brother goes, "Here's a free link." I put it in. I'm like, "Oh no! Oh
yeah!
Oh come on! No!" And I said, "Oh, forget it." I told him for me, it's just not productive. Plus, I have an art ability. Why would I lower myself to what they're? Even though, in a sense, they'd spend more time than I would have to make it look crisp in some of the things. The concepts are crap. The way they draw things, it's just no.
It has a hard time understanding like any kind of symbolism or like feeling. Like it can't get it right.
Yeah, that depth is gone. I mean, it's a very shallow understanding. If it's an understanding at all, it's a very shallow imitation.
Yeah, imitation. That right. So that's why I don't really prefer it. I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, if people can, especially if they use it for activism, like, cause I've had some leftists get pretty mad that I'll share AI for activism, and I'm like, the activism is more important than me giving a shit if it's AI or not. I mean, I
find I've talked to people about this before. I'm a very messy thinker, and so I do find that I can use like ChatGPT or whatever to help me organize my thoughts, but
Right.
it can't think. Like, it's not smart enough to like write something good. you have to do the writing. You have to organize, help it, use it to help you write
right.
something good.
That's correct. That's right. That's exactly right. And I haven't really been tempted to. I mean, if you pay $20, I guess you get access to more of the ChatGPT features. And I haven't seen any value in doing that at all.
No. If
I've
they
just
start making it where you have to pay for it, I'm done.
Yeah, no, I've just played around with the free ChatGPT part, and it just flat out lies. It gets stuff wrong. It just doesn't make any sense. It's not
Supposedly,
it's
if
not real.
you
It's not real human thought, and you can sort of
that's
tell
right.
that it's lacking in that kind of soul, whatever it is. And I'm not someone who believes in. I mean, we're all on the same page. I've been an atheist for as long as I can remember. I don't believe that there's a soul that persists after death or any of that type of thing. I'm not into the supernatural part of it, but I really do think that there are ways that our brains work that are of such value that we still don't understand how they work that way and why that's important.
Yeah.
I just saw something yesterday about a study that came out on rats that were solving problems, and they've just done some new kind of brain scan research on rodents and found that many different areas of their brains are used simultaneously in solving problems, and it just has something having to do with stuff flashing throughout your neural cortex that helps you to figure stuff out. But that's how my brain works. I don't have a clear linear process to solve a particular problem. I will think about something and I'll walk around with it in my head. I may sleep on it, and then bang, it all comes together. That's just how these things work.
Yeah. Speaking of that, so did you get anything down in the area that you're working that you felt was amazing that you wanted to talk about? Like,
yeah, they
I
were
know you did a
kinds,
lot of different
all kinds
stuff
of things
down
that
here.
were amazing. I mean, I wound up finding the oldest pottery in Costa Rica, which goes back about 4,000 years.
Right on.
Which I was able to recognize because I'd been focusing on that problem and I knew what to look for. So when I saw it, I could tell what it was. And then I compared that to other pottery in other places, and we did radiocarbon dating and stratigraphy and all of this stuff to figure out exactly when it dated to and what culture was using it. But I've been interested in things all up and down the time scale. One of the most recent projects I was working on, we were looking at these big house platforms and plazas in a relatively large, not a lost city, but an abandoned village in northeastern Costa Rica, where we were really able to get a good set. We spent a lot of time mapping these house platforms, but also mapping the roads that went to them. And we were actually able to find that this paved road connected with an unpaved road that went all the way up into the mountains, a couple hundred kilometers away.
Were they getting resources from the mountains, or
they were getting they were trading with people, but they were also getting stone for making grinding stones and things like that. They were probably getting well, actually, I think what they were mostly doing was trading the stuff that they were making with groups that were located up in the highlands.
What were they making? The pottery, you mean?
Well, no, they were actually making gold. They were making stuff out of gold.
They
were making stone sculpture, and they were making gold jewelry. And so I think they were trading that, and they were also making things out of greenstone, out of jadeite, and things like that. So I think that they were trading those up to the highlands. Probably for different types of food products, or for bird feathers, or for pelts. I think there were a lot of kind of perishable things that people were trading for in different places. But what we were able to see, and this was really something we kind of grokked on, was the relationship between the mountains and the rivers and the coastlines, and how it was that people were moving across this landscape as a whole. And that for me was the most amazing thing that came out of this, was being able to look at this landscape and look at the distribution of the sites on the landscape and then have it make sense in terms of, oh, okay, that's how they're moving. That's where they're going. That's why they're going where they're going. And it becomes this sort of brilliant access to all of these multiple resources, from the coast to the valleys to the highlands, and all of these types of things come together. And you really get a sense of how people were using the landscape as a whole, and probably viewing it as well.
Were they doing land in the clan way of ownership? Like in the Pacific Northwest, they own parts of the river, the clan does?
Yeah, I think they probably were. I mean, it's very difficult to say because we don't have the detailed historical records that we would like to have. I mean, we've got some, and we use what we can find. But among the most interesting things that I think have come out of this research is that it seems that the houses and the land were owned primarily by women and the women's clans.
Also, matrilineal.
And that in general, the women were much more stable. The women were much more, what's the word I'm looking for? The women were much less likely to sort of move around the landscape than the men were. Probably because they were doing childcare and because they were tied in with their families and other types of things like that. Whereas the men would go on these fishing expeditions, hunting expeditions, warfare expeditions, trading expeditions. The men were in general much more mobile. And the women stayed in one place. And I don't have any clear documentation of this. It's something I'm still playing around with in my head. But I'm sort of thinking that it was a strategy on the part of the women to have multiple men, guys who would do different things well. So part of the year they've got a good fisherman who's coming and bringing them fish, and part of the year they've got somebody who's the farmer who's bringing them crops. But I really think that human relationships were much more fluid, and that they depended on what kind of reciprocal relationships were happening but between the men and the women. But I think in general it was matrilineal clans that were associated with particular parts of the landscape. And there was the matrilineal clans that when warfare happened, it was basically men going to war against other men in order to defend these territories that were essentially matrilineal territories.
Mm-hmm.
At least in Costa Rica. Now, if you go to the north or you go to the south, then you find this very clear patrilineal succession, where it's kings and their sons and their grandsons who are proclaiming their power. So
you mean like Mesoamerica?
like
down by the Incas, or do you?
Yeah, both of those. Both of those are ones where you get these long lineages of lists of the 10 kings. But it's all and the artwork shows mostly men. But one of the things that has been most interesting to me about the Isthmo-Colombian area is that I think that they probably had radically different kinship arrangements than the groups to the north and the south. And it also helps us to understand a little bit better what these societies were like before they became strongly patrilineal. Because that's a tendency that you see around the world, is that you go from kind of Neolithic early farming societies in which women play a much bigger role to the later state societies in which men are grabbing the power and exercising it and displaying it in different ways. We're starting now, I think, hopefully tomorrow, right? We're going to see an evolution in the right direction. And
I already voted, so I mean,
yeah, I did too. But hopefully the news will come out starting tomorrow about how we are shifting to a female leadership in this country, and away from the toxic masculinity that's been demonstrated by Mr. Trump. Not so much by Joe Biden. I think he's done a really good job of appointing women in lots of important roles. But I think that
even if Trump does, hold on a second. Even if Trump did it all women, he would be sexualizing them.
Yes, that's
it's
true.
not like equals or because he thinks they're
No.
intelligent or women have some value outside of him.
Right. No, that's absolutely true. But I really do think it will be a significant thing when we shift to female leadership in this country, because I think that that's just going to be a shift of consciousness. But anyway, the point that I'm making is that I think that there are these trajectories that sort of make sense, going from kind of egalitarian hunting and gathering societies to early agricultural villages. And then as they control more and more resources and begin fighting over those resources, that you ultimately get sort of patrilineal forms of government, which then turn into kingdoms and empires and things like that, which ultimately, often will evolve into female leadership. I mean, that happened with Queen Elizabeth I. It happened with Queen Victoria. It's not a new thing. We've seen major empires with female leaders before. It just hasn't happened in this country yet.
Well, and I think it's even crazy that this country thinks that somehow that's an issue. I mean, it's just so.
Yeah, it makes no sense to me at all. The fact that anybody would vote for Trump because they don't want a woman to be in charge.
You can just stop it. I can't even think how anyone vote for Trump. I mean,
no, right.
Excuse me. What? Hell no. I mean, there's so many reasons. I've already said before. I mean,
yeah,
it's not like one reason. It's
right.
not. I mean, it's almost everything that he touches is like just smeared with crap. I don't know too many things that I could say that wouldn't be bad if Trump was involved.
Right. Well, I think we're in 100% agreement on that. The point I wanted to make is that archaeology is not just about the past, or about these exotic people or places. Yeah. It tells us about ourselves. It tells us about things that we are experiencing in our culture.
Oh yeah, you're preaching to the choir there, because I totally value archaeology.
Yeah,
and in fact, that's why I constantly also share the real archaeology stuff. I feel like that's constantly what I'm doing, even though sometimes I deal with myths or whatever, or DNA and stuff. It's not, but right. It's still related to all that.
But you do a fantastic job with it, and I hope that you get the feedback that you deserve. I mean, I see what your numbers are in terms of followers. I don't have any clue really as to what kind of feedback you get for your art, your podcast, your blogs.
I get almost like nothing. That. Almost nothing. I get some people go, oh, like out of the blue, people will go, oh man, all your art's so great. I'm like, you never said anything ever, ever to me. And I would say that I'm now on 0.1% on academia for 10,000 views. So,
well, that's getting there.
Yeah, it's getting there. I know once I do my book, of course, once you have a book, somehow that makes you better. But
yeah,
I know once I do that, but also my book will be, in a sense, just more my opinions and a lot less of any kind of archaeology. But
right.
I'll have blogs that show that how I got to those opinions, of course.
Sure. But it does communicate to an audience, and there are people out there whose consciousness you are affecting because they see what you produce, and they sort of recognize what the possibilities are that they hadn't considered before. Which for me, and this gets back to your whole counseling thing, for me that becomes something that saves people's lives. People who've gotten to the end, they can't see what the next step is going to be. They can't picture what their place is in the world. Right. They can't figure out what it's all about, or why it's even meaningful, and it hurts so much that they just want to check out. That you can actually show them a path and say, look, here's some things that are meaningful. Here's some things that you will enjoy. Here's some things that 10, 20 years from now you'll still be enjoying. So here's the future for you, and here's what it looks like going into your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, whatever. And when people can see that, it saves their life. I mean, you don't wind up cashing it in at 19 or 20, which is sadly what happens with a lot of people.
Well, and also, like you said about the issue of that I try to expose the myths and show the humanness, because I don't want another person to die because they feel bad because they're gay or trans, or right. because somehow I think they're less than because they're a female. Or, right. or all manner of different things, or people should kill anyone for a religion.
Right, right, absolutely. That's 100% true. And unfortunately, I think just as certain belief systems result in more pregnancies, certain belief systems result in more suicides. They're toxic ways of thinking that produce bad results. And I'm not saying more pregnancies are bad results. I'm saying more unwanted pregnancies. And we both know what I'm talking about, which is there are kind of repressive Christian ways of dealing with the reality of adolescent passion and adolescent sexual desire that just repress that. And instead, what you wind up getting is unwanted children in unwanted marriages with unwanted lives. And how many times have we seen that happen? As opposed to understanding what some of the other options might be and how you could do something differently.
Yeah,
I agree. Speaking of doing something differently, I really like the fact of the stuff down in Central America and South America, the fact that languages are connected. Language is really important to me. That's why I've studied so many of them. Is because I see that as shows the movement of people. Sometimes in a way on the land, if you just looked at the items, you wouldn't know.
Right.
But you see the language connection, you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, language is super, super important. And, the languages of the area that I focus on in my research are mostly languages in what's called the Chibchan language family, which, like any other language family, like the Romance languages or the Germanic languages or the Mayan languages or the Algonquian languages, there are a lot of different languages, Sino-Tibetan languages. Chibchan is a language family like those, and right. There are about 30 different Chibchan languages. In the north, they include languages like Pech. In the south, they included a language called Huisca, which was spoken in the area where Bogota, Colombia is located right now. They also included languages like Kogi, which is spoken in Highland, Colombia, and like Guna, which is spoken in Panama, and like Bribri, which is spoken in Costa Rica. But anyway, there are a whole mess of Chibchan languages between Honduras and northern Colombia, which are still spoken today by like 200,000 people. And language represents a different way of seeing the world.
Oh, yeah.
People come up with completely different metaphors, people completely different associations, different categories of things. I'm not a specialist in Chibchan linguistics, so I'm not really the right person to talk to about that. But I do know that there are things like categorizations of plants or animals or things that go together that are just totally different in these different language systems. And one of the things that I think is characteristic of Chibchan languages is just the way that people classify their relationships with other people. One of the things that is very common in Chibchan groups is to classify other people as siblings. Okay, and that we know what the words brother and sister mean, right?
Right, yeah.
And we may have words like half brother and half sister, and then we have cousins, first cousins, second cousins. Well, in Chibchan groups, they will use the same terminology for brother and sister and sibling for what we would refer to as half brothers or cousins, or even people who we don't have a blood relationship with. And we do that in English too. I mean, you got the the brother in the hood, or you got the bro. I mean, the whole bro culture is an example of that extension of brotherhood, although not really, but that's what the language does.
Right, yeah.
But it's something along those lines where you're using the metaphor of brotherhood to indicate this relationship and who is whose brother. Well, you're my brother, or you're my sister, or you're my family member. You're a member of my family. I see you that way. I see you in the same category as I see my brother or my sister or somebody else who's in my family. Well, that conditions everything else that you're seeing.
I agree.
And then when you begin extending those kinship terms to things like animals and plants, then you're getting into a completely different philosophical way of seeing the world. And you're talking about your brother the fish, or your brother the deer, or your brother the eagle. And those are much more native ways of seeing the world. But this notion of kinship, and the words that you use for kinship matter. They make a big difference.
I agree. Like the Jensen languages that relate to the Natanen that come over to the Americas, the Jensen languages in Siberia, they actually call themselves the men, like not women, the men. And they're very sexist. That was one of the things that Russia tried to remove. They were actually too sexist for the Russians,
right?
Which is whoa.
Yeah.
But my point is, so I agree with you. Imagine if you saw all of everything in that way. That absolutely changes how you approach everything in life.
Yeah. Well, language conditions the way that we deal with the rest of the world. And we've been seeing a huge amount of that in this fucking election, where, whether you're using the term undocumented worker or immigrant or alien or illegal, you can use a bunch of different words for the same thing, but those words reflect how you're viewing other people.
Yeah.
And so we really need to be much more conscious of how these words affect our worldview. And that's one of the reasons why looking at these cultures, these different cultures, these radically different cultures from ours, is so worthwhile. It's because you begin seeing completely different ways of seeing the world, and you realize, and I think that this can be very empowering for those people who feel like they're in a box. I mean, there are a lot of people, you were probably in this situation too, there are a lot of people who just feel like they're raised in a little box. And they're never going to get out of that box, and they're going to be stuck in that box forever. And it just becomes kind of unbearable to think, oh man, I hate this box. This is not the box I want to be in. And then to realize that, wait, there's not a box at all. You've got a whole menu of possibilities, of ways that you could be and see the world. And they're kind of infinite. They actually are infinite. And so, once that box goes away, then there are all kinds of paths and possibilities that become real, and are very much there in terms of options and alternatives. And this is where, I have problems with that word alternative. You hear about alternative history, alternative archaeology.
Yeah.
It's not alternative. It's the same old shit that we've been hearing for hundreds of years. And I like to say that the problem with the pseudoarchaeology folks is not that they have too much imagination. It's they've got too little imagination. They keep going back to the same things over and over again. Where
too much little imagination, like I talked to our video on pyramids. I made Corey look at this thing where they showed a hand drill, and I said, everyone gets all freaked out and goes, there's drill marks. I'm like, okay, hand drills.
Yeah, so get creative.
Yeah, use your imagination. You can picture it if you try.
Yeah, so I agree with you. Definitely, but I feel it's more racist or ethnocentric than any honest desire to even find out.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's very true.
I mean, especially Graham Hancock. Could you imagine 30 years and you still are at like second grade questions for history? Really?
Yeah, well, I've been commenting on this a little bit on social media, but I watched a couple of interviews that he's done. He's done like 2 or 3 interviews just in the past couple of weeks around the release of his series. And in a couple of them, he's gotten pretty personal, and he's kind of talked a bit about how he is. But I listen to these interviews very, very carefully, and I've been listening to his stuff for a long time. And it's like, man, do you still not understand this question that you said you were interested in 30 years ago? If you were interested in this thing 30 years ago, and you've had all of this time to travel, to read, you've had money to do all of these different things, and you're still can't answer this simple question, what's wrong with you? It doesn't move ahead at all. It's all pretty stagnant stuff. And I was kind of joking, and people came back at me for saying this, but I believe this is true. I just don't think he's very smart. I think that there are people who can kind of give this appearance that they're smart. Yeah. But if you're asking the same damn question for 20, 30 years and not hearing the answer, even when people are telling you the answer over and over again, there's a problem there.
Yeah, it doesn't even match any of the facts. It doesn't match the DNA. His statements don't match the DNA. don't match the pottery, don't match any distinct culture, don't match any sort of migrations. I mean, everything he says, I was like, no. So much that I know shows that everything he says is wrong. It's he goes, maybe it's possible. No, it's not. It's not in any way. There's no way you could show that to be possible. It's just not happening.
Right. Yeah, but you've had the experience, Damien, and Corey may have done this too, of saying, okay, I really want to figure out this DNA thing. Okay, I really want to see, what are the patterns, what's the evidence, what's the basis, what are the arguments. So I'm going to spend, I don't know, a couple of weeks or a couple of months figuring this thing out, and then you read it and you read the papers, and then you get to a point where you say, okay, I think I've got a pretty good idea of this. Let me go talk to Hoops and see if he agrees that this is right. And then so you do that, and I say, yeah, that's right, you got it. But with Hancock, I don't see him putting in that effort at all. There's not, you don't see him going into the library for 2 or 3 weeks or 2 or 3 months and saying, okay, I'm going to figure out this DNA thing. It's just not there. It's just not happening.
No, but the truth is, if he actually did it, which I've explained in several videos with Corey, the DNA is against him. Just like the fact of the male DNA, right? Because I talked about it. I think it's funny. He had a blog, which he didn't say it now about, but he has a blog, right? That RB1, right? Which relates to the white skin. I said to Corey, there's 2 problems with that for me. A is that's female DNA you're pointing to, and then you're pointing to male DNA in the Americas, and you're acting as if those 2 go together, and they don't.
Yep.
First off,
one is mitochondrial, the other is Y chromosome.
Like, okay, so you're not real smart, as John says, and I think that would be some good evidence that you point to, look, here's the oldest white DNA, it's a female, and then you point to the Americans and you go, oh, look, they sound the same. They both have R1b. Problem is, there's the male version and the female version, so he's not that smart. And then the second problem, as I showed Corey, we know where that DNA was. It was in the Middle East. 22,000 years ago until about 14,000 years ago, it didn't go anywhere. And it was in the Middle East, and it went nowhere past that. So this whole thing of maybe, no. So yeah, I did look at the DNA, but I wasn't trying to debunk Hancock. I was trying to figure out, how does this stuff relate, and try to figure, I want to understand what happened. It's that when I did that, I realized, wow, Hancock is totally wrong. Yeah.
Well, he sells something that's simple and reassuring to those people who don't want to do their homework. And I think there are a lot of people out there who are just they feel very uncomfortable with complexity. The same kind of people who, you go see it. I think we've all had this experience. You go see a movie that affects you in a really intense way, and you want to talk about that with somebody, but they just want to talk about, where we're going to go get pizza and what are we going to put on it. And you can't get somebody who wants to talk about, what has just affected you in a really profound way. Like, oh man, I can really relate to that. And did you see what he said to her then? And this is what he meant. And this is what they were exploring. And this is why they use that particular symbolism or that scene, or, whatever it happens to be. If you're into movies, you can talk about movies that way. And you can say, well, why did they pick this particular actor? And, why did they shoot it in this particular location? Or why did they put these 2 scenes next to each other? I mean, there are a lot of ways that you can deconstruct a film. And there are people who really enjoy talking about that and who really get into it and who get something meaningful out of it. And then there are other people who say, well, no, we should get pepperoni or we should get mushrooms. Right. And that's all they want to talk about after having seen one of these films. And it's like, man, there's so much more to talk about. There's so much more depth that we could go into. And all you can say is, oh yeah, that was cool.
Yeah.
It's a different approach. And that's the frustration that I feel. And I don't want to condemn anybody for that. There are a lot of people who just don't want a lot of intellectual depth. That's just not what they want to do. They're happy watching their sports. They're happy watching their game shows. They're happy watching whatever it is that they are into. But don't get in the way of the rest of us who actually do want to go to depth on these things.
Yeah.
and don't get in the way of the rest of us who want to get other people interested in it the way that we're interested in it. And that's, for me, and I think for you also, because this is what you say, and I hear it, is that it's not about, you know, dissing those people who are, you know, the Hancock fanboys. It's like, okay, we understand you're a Hancock fanboy, but don't get in the way of the rest of us who want to talk and teach people about these sites, about these cultures, about these languages, about their DNA, about these kinship issues, about chronology, about different dating methods, about artwork. You know, don't get in the way of us who really want to invite more people into understanding these things with more depth. That's what I find objectionable, is people who become impediments to the learning of others.
Right, like I told you, I didn't even consider Graham Hancock anything. Someone had told me, like, I don't know, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, because my wife always goes, it's like 10 years, because I always forget. But someone brought up and said, "Oh, Damien, I think you're doing stuff like Graham Hancock." And I looked at him like, fuck no, I'm doing real shit. His is absolute horse crap. He might as well be creating a new religion as far as I'm concerned. It's that unconnected to reality.
Well, but I think that is what he's consciously trying to do. I think he would really like to think of himself as creating a new mythology. And I don't see him as really a cult leader, but I think he likes to think of himself. Well, yeah, I mean, but
to invent a new thing and then have everybody only believe yours and then attack everyone on the outside and only bring come on, everything.
Well, that's true. That's true. There's a lot.
And I do have a psychology degree, so I can look at psychology things and make psychology judgments.
Okay, well, I was giving him the benefit of the doubt.
No, that's what I'm trying to say too about me. Is at first I just blew it off. You're the one who helped me understand it was more toxic than I realized. But the first someone brought it to my attention, I was looking at real stuff, and I'm like, what? I thought, oh, it's just some stupid thing, but I didn't think, oh, it's not that harmful because it's not like religion where people are killing gays. So I thought, oh, it's not, or whatever. I'm like, oh, so it's not. And I just said, oh, that's bullshit. Look at it. He's writing the Pseudoarchaeology. Don't even ever talk about that name again to me. And I just ignored it. I told you, I thought you only wrote one book because I didn't really look at it because I didn't care. Oh, he's nonsense. Okay, not interested. I mean, nope. But then I told you, before his show came out, I had two people, a leftist who I thought was intelligent and thought about stuff, tell me we don't need to trust science because Hancock proves it. And an atheist told me almost the same thing. Well, I don't really trust science anymore because that they're always wrong and they lie. And Hancock has caught them in lies, and I'm like, whoa, I need to attack this guy.
Yeah. He is a very active, militant, anti-intellectual.
Yeah,
he really is an enemy of the intellectual process.
Yeah. Oof. So
I've been using a paraphrase of Martin Luther King Jr. One of his famous quotes was, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere," which I think was a really beautiful and insightful statement. But what I've been doing is a paraphrase of that, which is that disinformation anywhere is a threat to information everywhere.
Yeah, well, and like I said, it's not me think, oh well, maybe the Hancocks could be, stuff could be, taken as anti-science. People have told me it's anti-science. That's like when that thing about the race, he doesn't, he's not a racist. Well, the racists love your stuff, so they think it's racist.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was like Trump during his first campaign, in which he was saying, "No, I'm not racist," and then David Duke and the KKK come out and they say, "Oh yeah, we really love Donald Trump. We love what he's saying." It's like, well, if the racists think you're racist, then you really need to reconsider what it is that you're saying.
Yeah.
And I don't know, did you watch that clip of the I've forgotten what his name is, the Tree of Life guy, the guy who threatened the jurors in the Tree of Life case? No. Anyway, I think I sent you a link to it. It was the white supremacist talking about Hancock.
Well, I do remember the white supremacists talking about Hancock, yes. And I told you, That actually made I already the other stuff you had sent me to before already made me realize, like even like you're like Donnelly and stuff. I didn't know about all that because I told you I didn't look.
Yeah, well, it's a very niche thing. I mean, it's not something a lot of people know about.
But I'm glad I do, because it made me also like the book that me and Corey are reading, the about the Mound, myth of the Great White Race or whatever.
Oh yeah, that's a great book.
Yeah. I didn't realize, oh my man, America's like founded on this racist horse shit. You're like, oh my God.
Yeah, once you begin seeing that, you wind up being red pilled as to what the real story is. And I like to say, I'd like to point out to my students and others, I say, there are real conspiracies. I'm not a conspiracy theory, but for the past 200 years, there has been a real conspiracy to hide the experience of Native peoples from the majority population.
Yeah,
there has
I
been
agree.
a conspiracy to hide the reality of African Americans from the rest of society.
Yeah.
There is a conspiracy to kind of slap the label of critical race theory on anything that has to do with non-white people and keep it out of public education. I mean, there is a conspiracy to do that. They want, that's what the objective is.
They say it out loud, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's not that much of a conspiracy. It's usually, I think, it was a hidden thing. This is out there and tell you the 5 points of how it's going to happen.
Yeah, well, a conspiracy doesn't have to be hidden to be a conspiracy. I mean, that's the general association, but when they spell it out in Project 2025 or whatever it happens to be, it's there. You can see it.
Yeah.
What becomes the conspiracy part of it is just how many people are involved in making it happen. That's what's really frightening, is when you realize, it's state legislators, it's school boards, it's all of these people.
But even like the reason that I was kicked off of Facebook for life was because I said Donald Trump, voting for him back at 16, voting for him and being Hispanic was like Jews voting for Hitler. And that got me banned for life from, they said, we do not want your kind of content. I'm like, really? How is this even an argument? Literally, the guy that's his running mate also called him America's Hitler, so it's not
that's
like,
right. Well, it's all over the place now. It's pretty obvious.
Yeah,
but
it's
yeah,
that's
actually
pretty clear fascist ideology.
So I know that there's a large thing like that should be able to be said. Come on, that gets me banned for life, and they're like, oh well, because I had a 14,000 page atheist page. I had like 3 groups. One of them's anti-Trump, and I was like, they said that I have too much influence, and so they told me there's no rule. They said we're going to hold you more accountable because you influence people, and I said, yeah, but you haven't said my influence was bad. I mean,
well, and they're making bank off of your influence. I mean that you're getting them
definitely.
page views. You're creating content for them.
Yeah. And then they banned me because I said something that they didn't like, that supports, as you said, like supports that he's a racist. Like he says it. So you don't have to look for Donald Trump's racism.
Yeah.
Well, I got kicked off of Facebook for something very similar. I mean, I wasn't saying that, but I had a 16-year Facebook profile. I got on Facebook in 2005, so it was one of the longest running Facebook profiles that there was, because Facebook came online in 2004 and I was on there a year after that. But the reason I got banned from Facebook was because I was in a discussion group, and it was called Black and White. It was for discussing black and white issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I posted a link to a YouTube channel by a guy named Robert Sepper. And you probably know his stuff and his content.
Isn't he a racist?
But he's a neo-Nazi. Yeah, he says he's an anthropologist, but he's not. And it's all this neo-Nazi stuff. But anyway, the comment was something along the lines like, can you believe this neo-Nazi? And then I put the link and I posted it, and I immediately got a flag from Facebook saying this content is prohibited, because apparently they had an algorithm that banned his YouTube channel. I didn't know that. I didn't get any warning about that. So I just posted the URL, and then the next thing I know, it's like, you've had too many violations. We're sorry, but your profile has been disabled. And like that, it was gone. But it was all
I
because
think
of,
that's ridiculous.
it was because of a string of what they called community standards violations. One of which was posting an image file that was the cover of Led Zepp's Houses of the Holy album, the one that has the little kids climbing up on this geological
They
formation.
said it was pornography.
Yeah, well, they flagged it and put me in Facebook jail. And then there was a story in Rolling Stone magazine saying Facebook will no longer be suspending accounts for posting Houses of the Holy. So I posted it again, and they put me in Facebook jail again after they had announced that they wouldn't. But it was just stupid things like that. They put me in Facebook jail once for posting an image of American GIs in Europe holding up a Nazi flag. And because there was a swastika on it, the algorithm found it and put me in Facebook jail.
Well, I got in trouble many times for some of the archaeology figurines that I'm like, it's not even that detailed of a drawing, and it's literally an archaeology thing, and I got in trouble. I'm like,
yeah,
it's ridiculous. It's not even like makes sense.
Well, I have a theory about it, which is I think that they outsource some of the people who write these algorithms and check on things. And my theory was that they were outsourcing it to some place like India or probably Pakistan, where they had people who were extremely rigid with regard to what they would allow.
Right.
And so because it doesn't fly in Muslim Pakistan or Indonesia or wherever, that you can't have it on Facebook. So, but anyway, we both had our social media experiences, and I think I have a lot of experience with it, so I sort of know what's going to happen and what to dodge and here and there. I've gone back and forth about Twitter. I'm still kind of curious to see what's going to happen with the changes to viewing to people who you've blocked viewing your content.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether that's gone into effect yet, but they were going to make it possible for people who you've blocked to see your content even though you blocked them. And I just don't. I don't know what kind of effect that's going to have. There are all kinds of people who are going to see stuff that I've said, and they're not going to like it. Well, too bad.
Yeah, it's like a rearview mirror. If I don't look, there's no one back there.
Yeah, but anyway, getting. I mean, you said you want to talk about Central American archaeology, which I love talking about. And I really try to push content out to people because one of the things I most enjoy is turning people on to something they did not even know exist. It's like, okay, here's something new that has just entered my consciousness. I did not even know that was real. And now you're telling me it's real. It's like a real thing. And yeah, there it is. You can go see it. It's real. Welcome to that part of the world. You know, it's almost like, you know, for video gamers, sometimes there's this thing where you happen to pick up a particular treasure or open a particular door, and all of a sudden there's a whole other section of the game that you can go into.
Oh yeah,
it's like that. You know, I like to open up whole other rooms or worlds or levels, so that people can go into them and be enriched by that. But
so what I would say about pottery too is I think that especially when it gets to Japan, comes from China and goes north.
Right.
To me, I think it's connected with religion and like social feasting.
Right. I think that's exactly right.
I think they may have even done it at ritual times, like, you know, like a celebration, like a solstice or something. Not that it was the solstice, but I'm just saying celebrations and religious as a community thing. Like you dig a big pot or you build a pot, you can have multiple people all share in the thing.
Oh, I think that's exactly right. I mean, that's what you find in Mexico and Guatemala, is that the earliest pottery are these big vessels. They're not little vessels. They're big things that were made for communal preparation of large quantities of food that could be served to a lot of people at the same time. And I think it was happening because people had resources that were seasonally abundant. Right. And basically, you know, it's just like anybody who has you know, a big garden of tomatoes or whatever. You suddenly get so many tomatoes that you can't possibly eat all of them yourself. So you start bagging them up and giving to your friends. Or if you have an apple orchard, same thing. You know, there are only so many apples that you can use, and then you can make some into cider, and you can make applesauce, and you can put them up. But if you have a lot of apples, you need to start giving out some of the apples away because you've got too many of them. And I think that was
I
what
know
was
they
happening.
they stored food, like I know in Peru they stored potatoes.
Right. Yeah.
And,
You can
and,
store
and in the
potatoes.
north, then they store corn. I mean, and it wasn't both of those. That's why I was asking before. Wasn't there sort of a cross pollination of those ideas?
Absolutely. Yes, there was. It's the ability to store dried maize kernels that made maize such an important thing. You can also dry and store cacao, which is used for making cacao beverages. But yeah, there are a variety of things that you can store. And actually, pottery made it a lot easier to store stuff, but it also made it easier to prepare foods for feasting. As to get back to the feasting thing,
right?
So one of the best ways to put your extra surplus food to use is to have a party and give it all away. Because if you know about the potlatch, if you know about how reciprocity works, that you actually increase your status, you increase the respect that people have for you, and you also increase. And again, this is just a metaphor for it. You increase the social indebtedness that people feel when you have done something of value for them, and that happens by giving stuff away. And you probably know this through your community work. You take a truck full of stuff to the hood and you give it away, and people love that. They view you as a really good and important person.
And I used to often eat with the homeless and stuff because I wanted them to see I wasn't seeing this as lower food that only they get. I wanted to show that going back to the community. I wanted to show I'm part of. I'm not just coming here watching you eat, which I thought felt kind of weird, but to actually.
Yeah, but to give that stuff away to help people get what they need. And the thing is, there's so many different societies where this happens, where somebody has an abundance of things, and then they basically give it all away. They become impoverished by having given it all away. And then over the following year or so, they get it all back in terms of what people are willing to do for them, whether it's, building a house or harvesting their field or bringing them fish or whatever it happens to be. But the people who give stuff away are the ones who get the most that's coming back. And holding a feast is one of the ways to do that. And having pottery that you can prepare large quantities of food in is one of the ways that's accomplished. So pottery allows you to prepare larger quantities of food, serve them all at the one time, and also not just the food, but also alcoholic beverages.
Oh yeah, they made alcohol.
Pottery makes it possible to brew up beer. All you need
Isn't
to
it 6,000 years? I think in I can't remember now where, but they make that alcohol in the Americas.
Right, chicha.
Chicha, yeah.
Yeah, chicha, but chicha can be made out of anything. I mean, chicha is just whatever juice has sugar in it will ferment, and it can be pineapple juice, it can be tomato juice, it can be made from manioc, it can be made from peach palm, it can be made from corn, whatever happens to be. There are a lot of different things that will ferment, and the fun thing about fermentation is that you mix up all of this beer, and then you invite people to your party, and because of the fermentation process, your beer actually becomes more alcoholic with each day of the festival. so people are drinking more and more alcohol as the party unfolds, and that's just a very common part of celebrations in Central America. It's just to drink your ass off. That's what people did. It was an ecstatic type of celebration.
Well, but it was also religious, right?
Yes, it was,
Yeah,
but we don't have this clear line between religion and social things. But yes, it was religious, very much so.
And then you do a lot of stuff about shamanism, and I know a lot of people don't realize that. To me, there's shamanism down there in the South and stuff.
Oh yeah, it goes all the way back. It was a very, very important part of healing, a very important part of kind of keeping communities together, and yeah, absolutely, it becomes a very important, critical part of how these societies work. And that's been an interest of mine for a long time as well.
Now, could you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, I know stuff, but
Yeah, well, I mean, there are a lot of different definitions for what shamanism is, and I think we are never going to have just one definition that fits everything. There are practices that will use plant teachers and entheogens and psychedelics, and there are others that won't use this at all. There are some that involve beliefs about transforming into animals, and there are others that don't have that either. There are some that are very highly personal. There are also ones that are done at a much bigger level, and that's a part of it as well. I mean, one of the things I've been interested in is sort of the metaphors of healing that are used, and the value of metaphors in shamanistic practices. And there are some shamans that will deal with you personally and the disorders that you're dealing with. So, for example, if you have diarrhea, they can tell you what to do for that, and they can treat you and dry you up. Or if your village has been flooded and you're dealing with a community-wide diarrhea, which is what a flood basically is, they can deal with that too. Are you? And I think that there were metaphors of the body that were applied to the environment as a whole. So a fever that a person experiences becomes a drought that a community experiences, or as I said, diarrhea that a person experiences becomes the flood that the community experiences. So shamans can address these illnesses or these disorders either at a personal level or at a community level. They can also address them at a sort of worldwide level, at the level of the entire world that you perceive. So that's an interesting thing too, is at what level is the healing going to take place? Is it going to be healing one person? Is it going to be healing a family? Is it going to be healing a community? Or is it going to be healing the world? Right. And those are all very similar in terms of the way that they're conceived. It's just the practices and the conception of it become somewhat different.
Right, but as you addressed, like I said to Corey, even the one thing that Hancock says that the people a long time ago could have been shamans, I said that I agree that it could have been shamans. Although when he explains what he thinks shamans did as far as like levitating rocks or whatever, I go, yeah, from everything that I've ever studied about shamanism, I've read a couple books and everything and tons of research articles that I've never heard that, ever. I mean, ever. So, I mean, it's like he comes up with stuff, and that's all I was going to say to you. Am I wrong? Have you ever heard of them levitating rocks in shamanism?
I absolutely have not. I mean, the closest I think I've come to it is the Indian rope trick, which is sort of something that British colonial people would observe, where you take a rope out of a basket and you make it go up into the air and then climb up the rope, and everybody says that they saw somebody climb up the rope. Right. Which I think is more sort of a mass hypnosis type thing, but it's not moving any rocks.
No. That's why I was saying is his thing of, well, I think that they were magicians of the gods and they were levitating rocks with their prayers or whatever. What? Where does he even come up with this nonsense? That doesn't match any ethnography I've ever read.
No.
Go ahead and anything that you want to say about the Isthmo-Colombian area or your work that you want to say before we wrap
Well,
it up.
among the things that I think are people should keep in mind about the Isthmo-Colombian area, and I'd be delighted to talk to people about this, but because you've looked at my books, you know this, that it was one of the main areas in the Americas where people worked gold. And gold is one of those substances that has always had this magical appeal to people. It's something that's always been very symbolic. It's not really surprising why that's true. It looks like the sun. It looks the sun, which is the main object in the sky that clearly affects everything in terms of climate, weather, and crops growing and everything else. It's not unusual to associate gold with the sun. But the other thing is that gold is uncorruptible. Gold is something that it does not oxidize. It doesn't combine with other elements, at least not in a not the way that iron rusts. It doesn't, or bronze develops a patina. It doesn't oxidize. So gold will stay as bright and as clean and as clear as you see it for thousands of years, or potentially tens of thousands of years. You know, you have a piece of gold and you put it in the ground and you dig it up and it still looks the way that it did when it went into the ground. It doesn't alter chemically. So that's something that made it very appealing. And then, of course, it's a relatively soft metal. I mean, it's a metal, but it's a relatively soft metal. So you can actually make it into a whole bunch of really cool things. It becomes one of those materials that's very easy to cast. And I know that you do lost wax casting, so you appreciate, you know, all of the different techniques that go into doing it. It's not an easy thing to do. I mean, you can sort of conceptualize it relatively easily, but to actually do it is a whole other thing.
Well, and you also have to understand how to make channels and stuff and how liquid moves.
Right,
you have to understand that because
and what you see involves a lot more infrastructure in the making of it. And you know, and this may seem like a weird analogy, but I think it's correct that the various channels and other types of things that you actually have to file off a piece after you've or cut off a piece after you've cast it. They're like the nubs on the big megalithic blocks.
Right.
People get all bent out of shape about these nubs, but it's like, okay, that's part of the process of the manufacture. That's how these rocks were lifted, is because they had these nubs on them. And then once you get it where you want it to be, you knock the nubs off and they go away. So yeah, of course, it seems kind of like mysterious how they got that there, because you don't see all of the steps. And the same is true with lost wax casting. As you see the finished object, you don't see all of these other steps. And that is one of the things that makes it so interesting and so impressive, is that you, unless you've done it yourself, you can't really see how to get from point A to point Z.
Well, and having done it myself, I'm looking at the pictures in your book. I'm like, that's outstanding.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, you just are blown away by the level of craftsmanship that people were able to achieve. It's like, how the hell did they do that? And you can sort of understand it in an intellectual way, but to think about all of the hand memory, you know, all of the stuff that goes into actually being able to do it, that's a whole other ballgame.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you coming and sharing your stuff, and keep being the great science champion that you are. And
well, thanks for all the content that you create, Damien. I mean, you're really putting out a steady stream of stuff. And one of the things I like to point out to people is that it's that creation of a steady stream of creativity that makes somebody a great artist. And people look at Picasso, for example. Well, one of the reasons Picasso was impressive was because he came up with these interesting ideas. But the reason he came up with these interesting ideas is that Picasso painted thousands and thousands and thousands of paintings. He was just a monster for painting, you know, multiple things a day.
right.
And it's that type of productivity that allows you to exercise the full range of what your creative energies are. And no, not everything's going to be great, and maybe a lot of it's not going to be great, but there will be a few great things that come out of it. And so just keep on being creative and keep on producing that whether it's that content or that artwork or that piece of jewelry or whatever it is that you're making, just keep pushing that creativity and keep putting things out there, and you will leave a legacy. There will be things that will last. There will be things that will change people's lives.
Well, I've already had archaeologists asked to put my art in like their books or whatever.
Oh, that's great. That's
And
really nice.
And I've had a couple people on academic, probably about 9 of them, use my stuff in like their articles for research.
Nice.
Because as you see, I use real stuff, so it helps them to see a different perspective, and then I have the data to go and, you know, I hope my stuff inspires. I hope it inspires people that don't know anything to become educated, and I hope it inspires educated people to look more into the things that I address. I mean,
yeah, well, and I think that your personal story is very compelling too, because it basically says, look, you can be interested in whatever you're interested in. It doesn't have to be archaeology. Maybe it's entomology. Maybe it's paleontology. Maybe it's marine biology, or whatever it happens to be. But, you know, maybe you didn't major in that at college. Maybe you didn't have a job in that area. Maybe that wasn't, you know, something that you were getting paid to focus on. But that doesn't mean that you can't learn it. That doesn't mean that you can't pursue it. That doesn't mean that you can't become an expert in it. But it does take a certain amount of discipline in that you do want to stay away from the crap. You know, the whole garbage in, garbage out does apply. If what you're learning is garbage, then what you're saying is going to be garbage too.
Right.
And a lot of it is about the pursuit of quality. And I've mentioned to people, and actually, this is one of the most important books I ever read in my life. Hopefully, other people will read it too. But it was by Robert Pirsig, and it's called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It was sort of a Bible of those of us in the 60s. Everybody read it. But basically what the book boils down to is the pursuit of quality, recognizing what is quality in something. What's quality thinking? What's quality craftsmanship? What's quality discourse? You know, what is the quality of quality that gives something value? You know, how do you recognize what's
which is value theory you're addressing, which is what exactly I focus on.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Have you read this book?
No, but I've read 5 college books on axiology.
Okay, well then you'll probably find this to be fairly pedestrian, but maybe you'll enjoy the metaphor.
But trust me, some of that stuff, that's actually what I didn't like. It's great, and you need calculus and all this stuff to do it like scientifically, and I'm like, okay, how do regular people do this? Because they're not.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I try to do the same thing. I try to take complex ideas and make them more palatable to a less educated or uneducated audience.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's super, super, super important. I mean, it's really something that is absolutely critical to do. And actually, I had a really interesting experience earlier today. I had sort of been admiring from afar the work by Mini Minuteman, Milo Rossi.
Yeah.
But I'd never actually spoken to him until this afternoon. And I called him. We exchanged contact information, and then I had an hour-long conversation with him this afternoon. And I was telling him that he's also one of those people who has really been filling this gap, filling this niche, helping people to understand that these things are not beyond their understanding. They're not out of their reach. They don't require years and years and years of formal scholarship to understand. This information is there. If you want to pursue it and you want to go for it and you want to identify it, then you can do that. And I think that Milo also does a pretty good job of representing the true intellectual depth to these types of things. Okay, whereas Hancock does exactly the opposite. He basically says, okay, here are my ideas. You don't need to know about anybody else's ideas because those other people are, totally fucked up and don't believe the archaeologists and don't believe the authorities and don't believe the professionals. Here are my ideas, and he sort of presents himself as the anti-authority, which is that his message is don't trust the authorities, but at the same time he's saying, but trust me, which, as you've rightly pointed out, is the cult psychology.
Because not only does he not have any fact, then the facts that we do know and are substantiated totally contradict everything he says. Like I said, he doesn't even match even shamanism, which I kind of agree would have been that time. But then how he says, you're like, okay, so you don't know that either. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, right. And that's a topic that he could go to quite a bit of depth on. I mean, there's a lot of literature on that and a lot of really interesting stuff. If you want to read the ethnographies, if you want to read about, Hmong shamanism in Cambodia, or you want to read about Tucano shamanism in Colombia, or you want to read about Zuni shamanism in the Southwest. I mean, there's just a massive literature out there about different shamanisms in different places, and that's it could be a lifelong study if people wanted to do it. But that's not the way he presents it. He doesn't lead his readers to any new insights or new information. He doesn't even teach them enough so that they can have the kind of insights that he claims to be having.
I agree. Well, and he doesn't have them.
Which he doesn't have. He just borrows them from other people. He just takes them from somewhere else.
Yeah. So,
anyway, I should probably start winding up with this. And it's actually, my wife said is a phone call from my daughter. So I'm looking forward to hearing.
Well,
from her.
take
For
care,
sure.
and we appreciate it.
But
And I'll be
I
adding this to the blog that is about Isthmo-Colombian Area.
okay, well, it's always a delight to talk to you, and I will just remind you of someone who you've interviewed before and who you might yet go back to, a wise elder who knows about shamanism and who knows about pseudoarchaeology and all of this stuff. But don't forget about Alice Kehoe. She is a gem. She's a treasure. She's 90 years old.
Yes.
So yes, she's getting up there, but she is a font of wisdom who should not be ignored. And
Yeah, I didn't ignore her. I talked to her and met her blog and conversed with her in email, and I put that all in the blog also.
Yeah, well, and I really appreciate that because you help lead people to her writings and her literature. Yes. And one of the most important books that she wrote that I think everybody needs to read right now is a book called Militant Christianity, in which she traces the history of the relationship between Christianity and metaphors of warfare and violence. And she kind of shows that this supposed religion of peace, may say that that's what it is, but in fact, if you look at what it has actually done throughout history, it's a very different picture. And that it the spread of, she starts off by focusing that the spread of Christianity with Emperor Constantine was really done for militaristic purposes, and that a big part of the Christian afterlife story was so that soldiers, Constantine's soldiers, would be willing to go violently in battle and not be afraid of dying, right, because they saw something afterwards. And that she also pointed out, you may remember this, that the Chi Rho symbol, the thing that became the Constantine's vision, which was kind of the cross with that it looks like a P on top of it, that was the Christian symbol, that's actually a representation of crossed swords and a battle axe. So the Christian symbol is actually a military symbol, a symbol of military violence, at least for Constantine and Constantine's armies. And he had this dream in which if you put this symbol on your shields, then you'll prevail over your enemies. But anyway, that's just one of Alice's books. One of the ones that I think deserves as much attention as her books on shamanism and religion. She has a book on the ghost dance. She actually recently has wrote an autobiography, which is also worth reading. But anyway, she's one of those many people who I think are, I know you've had on, and I know you've talked to, and I'm just so appreciative of your promoting her perspective, because it's a really valuable one. Oh yeah, and I hope she's with us for a long time. But like I said, she's 90 years old now.
Yeah, and I appreciated her feminist stuff and her talking about her experiences in archaeology and how sexist it was.
Absolutely. Well, that's a big point of her biography.
And that's the same thing I feel with Hancock. When he talks about bad stuff about archaeologists, I'm like, he's not actually talking about archaeologists today. Maybe 50 years ago.
Right.
100 years ago,
yeah,
the antiquarians, before it was even the anthropologists or archaeologists. Maybe
I think that's exactly right. Yep. Okay. Well, I got to sign off. Right. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. You guys are great. Keep doing what you're doing. And this is really something that is healing the world. It's helping heal and repair the world.
I agree.
Okay. Take care.
Have a good one.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Right, Corey, go ahead and tell us about where to find you and what's your stuff. So go ahead and tell us about your stuff, what you're doing, and where to find you.
I guess, as always, it's the Skeptical Leftist podcast or YouTube channel. And I'm at Skeptical Lefty or at Skeptical Leftist on pretty much all the social media sites. And we're doing podcasts and reviewing books. And I did a stream on the U.S. election with some people.
Right.
That was pretty cool. That's out on the podcast feed now. And I'm working on doing some writing, but like I said before, my brain is a messy thinker, so it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to get that translated into something worth reading. So, yeah.
Well, if you ever want to guest publish something on my website, I'll do that for you.
Sure. Yeah. No, that'd be great. Yeah.
And also, everyone, the next show is going to be on Corey's channel live, where I'm going to talk about the different mound cultures and the different stuff that we addressed in the 5 or whatever 6 videos.
Yeah. So we'll do that live, probably the same time as we usually do our show.
It's up to you. So, I mean, this is on your show, so we'll do it. I told you, I'm available all the time. I mean, I'm constantly, as you see, putting out stuff, so I'm constantly researching, working, and doing it. I mean, I'm not like sitting here doing nothing. But what I'm saying is, I'm willing to work around your schedule. You have a schedule. Sure. I really don't. I mean, I told you before, I prefer not like 9 o'clock at night because that's like the time I go to bed.
Right.
I won't be on my game.
Fair.
But
yeah, no, that'd be great. Maybe we can do it in the early evening like we did this time,
sure.
because that's when there's more people are off work and they're.
I agree, and I really want people to engage because
for sure
I think this stuff is super important, and all the stuff I talked about, I can't imagine that there'd be 0 questions.
Yeah, unless we get 0 viewers, but which sometimes happens.
Well, anyways, but I'm still going to be posting it. I'm going to make. Already made the blog that has to do with shell mounds and all the different mounds. So there's already a blog, and it's going to go into and stuff. So no matter what, it's going to be out there. And like I said, if no one else asks questions, then you can ask questions, and if you don't really have or know what to ask, I will just say things because, sum it all up or some each show up or whatever we want to do. Because, I mean, I know a lot and I can sit here and just talk.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at coming up with questions sometimes. So I think I can come up with a couple that maybe I might know the answer already, but somebody else.
But something you might have wanted to know, and then you found out when you watched the video, or we did the video. And just think, 6 or 7 videos. I know there's a lot of content that you learned.
Yeah. So some isn't stuck in my head, but some of it is. So yeah.
Well, right, but anyways, we'll do a video so we can do that. And then, like I was saying to you before, I am willing to come on your show more to help promote your show. Sure. Yeah, so, I'm always happy to have. I mean, like I said, what's that?
I'm always happy to have you on.
Well, I'm just saying. So, if you have some specific thing you want to talk about, or like I said, we each month or whatever, we could have a recap of the shows we do here, and do
that's probably a good idea.
Or,
Yeah.
Because I think it's also it would help connect the 2 shows together, and it would give people an extra thing they're not getting. And like I said to you, is I could even do some stuff where we do it only on your Patreon. That way, people that want something extra, whatever explanation or whatever, will have to go to your Patreon. Because like I said, I do want this to help you also.
Yeah, I'm always torn with the Patreon exclusive stuff because I want everything I do to be available to everybody who wants it. But I want to give people who support me a little bit extra, right?
Right.
So
no, I understand it. But like I was just saying, and also I want to eventually, do stuff on was it Twitch or whatever?
Or TikTok?
TikTok.
Yeah, we were thinking about some shorts or some very short videos, the quick.
Yeah, like I said, I want to do something like we have like a timer or something, and maybe on the screen where I can see it and everyone else can see it, and then maybe we just show a picture all these, because I've made all this art, and I could sit there and talk about just what it says in a way that even if you read, you don't know what I know. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. For sure.
So, I mean, I think that would be a fun way of getting people more interested in what I'm, showing in the first place. Because if you look at too far, it's just art, like all this neat thing. But actually, I have lots sometimes of info on one piece of art.
Yep. And, there's no doubt about that. There's a lot of your art has got a lot of stuff going on it. So you got to really actually be reading something alongside it or hearing something that explains
it would definitely help. So I'm just saying we could do a whole bunch like that, And I'm just saying that I want to do other stuff. And I was going to say to you too, is that we can put that on your channel if you want, or
Sure.
in your Patreon or whatever. I mean, and then we put it on Twitch or whatever. All I'm saying is that I want to do more to help promote, your stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So,
No, for sure.
I'm one of those evil leftists.
Yeah, that's right. Those evil leftists who want to help other people.
Yeah.
Straight. No, for sure.
All right. Well, take care, and I will see you next time. And let me know.
For sure.
And also, if there's something that you're doing, like talking to Justin or some other people on religion or something that relates to me, or anarchism, because especially my kind or whatever, also feel free to let me know. And I like I said, I want to help you.
For sure. Much appreciate. I will. I've got some ideas on how to do these things.
Right on.
Hopefully we can get this, rolling. For sure.
Well, like I said, I believe in you. I've said that from the beginning. I wanted you to come help me, and I believe in you. I think that what you're doing is great. In general, I'm an anarchist socialist, so you also like that stuff. So that's like an extra.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So it's nice that I can talk about all this atheist or whatever, but it's also super nice I can talk about anarchism.
Yeah. I find I like it talking to various other types of leftists and stuff too, but it's like often their ideas don't line up with my ideas, so it's like there's a little disconnect there where you and I were basically on the same page on most things, so that's always good.
Pretty damn close.
Yeah, so
way closer than anyone else I've ever really talked to a lot, because I'll get to a point and then it'll be like, well, not that thing. But me, it's like most things, it sounds like we've rehearsed together, to get all the things the same.
Yeah, either that or people just probably think I just agree with everything you say. I'm just being a yes man over here, but really,
Maybe.
No, I don't. I really, a lot of these things that Damien says, I thought of them as well, separately.
Right.
Not the prehistory stuff. I didn't know anything about any of that before.
But don't you feel like you've learned a lot and it's changed the way you view the world even?
I think it's reinforced the way I view the world. Because I was kind of at that anti-racist, pro-feminist, kind of anarchist, socialist type perspective before. And this is really an atheist and viewing, but without that judgmental, all religion is the same kind of idea, where I think you've just reinforced kind of where I am with my progressive views, and that these are the view. This is how actually people are supposed to thrive. This is the way that this is supposed to work. If it wasn't for these oppressive structures that got built up around us.
Right,
yeah.
and but that now, isn't that freaking awesome? I can't believe more anarchists aren't into this. Come on, this literally proves us right. I mean,
yeah. I've also recently read two kind of popular books. One is A Paradise Built in Hell by Rebecca Solnit, and the other is Humankind by Rutger Bregman. And they both are more they're a combination of ideas that really cement, even in the modern age, that it's people that are good and do the things that help each other, and people and power structures and systems of power and elites that stop us from doing those good things.
Yes.
And it's you combine the stuff with prehistory that we've gone over, and that how much that reinforces it. And then you combine these popular books that I don't know why they're not everywhere you go. Everybody should be reading these things. And then on top of it, our content, all the people I've talked to, I don't know. It's going to be pretty fucking hard to convince me not to be an anarchist socialist at this point in my life.
It ain't happening.
I don't think so. No, the evidence is pretty heavy.
Well, that's why once I changed to that persuasion, I haven't had to change anything.
Right.
Because I know Justin has changed, like, but not me. Once I got it, because also I got axiology. So once I got, like John was talking about, right? Once you get quality, once you grasp value, it's really hard to not see it everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you get it, you get it. And now, yeah.
Well, that's why I felt like I'm doing a spoon feeding anarchism to people by way of prehistory, because I feel, and also, but like I said, I think it's so great is that it allows me to address racism and classism and sexism and homophobia and religious bigotry. It allows me to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
So
for sure. It's awesome.
And that's also, like I told you too, I do appreciate the stuff that Justin, knows too, because he knows a lot of history that I actually wouldn't even want.
Yeah, he's kind of like modern history, I guess.
Yeah, modern history. I haven't really read, and some of the stuff he's read, I would never read intentionally.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough about, like, especially he gets into all those different, presidents and. I have zero interest. I would just start and go, okay, done.
That's fair. I find myself really interested in like all of it. Like I'm interested.
Well, no, I'm not saying, just understand people that I'm not putting down people that like that. I'm just saying, for me, I would never have done that because it's annoying to hear these fuckers.
Well, because even the good ones are not actually that good.
No.
That's the trouble. Like even like FDR, who was supposedly like one of the best presidents in the United States, was still like a war criminal, a racist, like
That's what I'm saying. So I don't, and I don't worship anarchists either, because we have anti-Semites and racists and sexists and homophobes and all other kind of fucking I mean, there's a lot that fought against that. So I don't, I mean, certainly our side is not like rampant with that shit, but the fact that it's there at all is pretty fucking disheartening.
But that's also like, that's the thing about anarchism too, is that rings true, is that we aren't about worshiping people or like following them blindly. Like if somebody does something wrong, then we can throw that thing they did wrong out.
Yeah.
We don't keep that.
Yeah.
Like Bakunin was good in some sense of, that's right. Like why would anybody say that they love Stalin? It's because their ideology blinds them, right? Where anarchists can throw that shit out. We can say, okay, well maybe there was a good idea or two from Stalin.
Yeah.
But we don't have to keep all that other shit to keep those good ideas.
Well, just like the two quotes I like from Lenin, that there can't be any socialism without democracy. A great quote.
Yeah.
And he also says, which he never did, or certainly didn't do it on an extent that was worthwhile. And then he says that as long as there's a state, there won't be freedom. There'll only be freedom when there's no state. I'm like, welcome to anarchism.
Wow, if only you stuck true to that quote.
So I'm just saying, yes, I could look at Lenin and go, there's a great quote. I 100% agree with that quote. You cannot have freedom with this shit.
Yeah.
So
I'm even one of these. I was just gonna say, I'm even one of these people who's like, I will make accommodation, say, for the Soviet Union and some of the things I disagree with that they did, because they believed they were doing them for the right reasons at the time. But I still see it as a failed project, ultimately. And Stalin and Lenin betrayed their views.
I'm against authoritarians. So if your whatever ends up authoritarian, that is a problem for me.
Yeah,
I fucking hate it. It's no.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm there. Like, well, you just need to understand. No. That's why anarchism appealed to me so easily. They go, we don't believe in authority. I'm like, oh, there's a word for that. Because boy, I'm right there.
And I guess when we were talking to John, one of the things that always sticks out to me when we're talking about Graham Hancock and his perspective on authorities as in experts.
Right. Yeah.
And like in the making of boots, I defer to the boot maker. Like John is an
correct. I'm not
archaeologist. He's an
talking about
expert,
that
right?
kind of
Yeah.
authority. Yeah.
It just the word authority made me think of it because he also used
true.
authority, right?
Yeah. Well, the authority I don't like is like saying what I can do with my body. Now that authority can go fuck off.
Exactly.
That's like people are like I've heard people go, well, maybe we should legalize drugs, because it's not that bad. I don't care if it's bad. I don't care if it leads to death. If people are choosing it willingly themselves, I say it should be legal.
Yep.
Because it's their fucking body. They have a right to fucking die. I do think as a society, we should make clinics to help people get off if they want. And we should talk about the benefits of not being constantly so fucking high you're ruining your life. If you're ruining your life, it's not good.
AA or NA or whatever, that could be a thing in a better world to help people that want to be helped.
I really don't think that particular AA.
Well, no, yeah,
that's more cultish than about the Bible and still and religion and
they're very religious based.
But something where we care as a group. I think group counseling is like the shit. When I got into counseling, it was first all about individual. I've had one group counseling in like for school, actually 3. I was sold. I was fucking sold. This is the shit. Because when it moves people so fast to help compared to like individual counseling sometimes. Individual counseling, it's good. You tell it and someone's asking whatever, but you don't get to see an outside perspective. I tell you that you're a battered spouse or something. I tell you that what it's like, to not do that. Well, that person will fight you for it. But when they're not talking, but they're watching someone else explain their life and they think in their head, that person should get out or whatever, they start to see their own, mirror their own. The
parallels are there, right? Yeah.
So, you start to go, whoa, and it allows to break through stuff that it's, super hard. Yeah. And it even when it's fake, this is what's so crazy about group counseling. Even if I told you this group counseling is fake, we're not trying to help anything, people still get help. It's fucking nuts. It works so well. We know why we're social animals and mirror neurons and all kinds of stuff. So when we do this group thing, we can't help it, but it affects us. Even if
for sure.
And so there's a thing, stages they have, like forming, storming, norming, and performing. And performing is a very, very limited time where you lose reality and you only focus on that thing and you feel like energized and enlightened. And then that moment goes. But I think group stuff was amazing. But
right on.
But I was just saying. I was at first start. I thought I would do individual. Then I was like, oh man, maybe I'll do groups because facilitating groups is so fucking powerful. But anyways, we'll one of these days we'll have a thing. I'll talk about psychology
for sure. Yeah. That's cool stuff.
Oh yeah. So I think that it's real important. Like we do is. We're presenting, I feel like a positive global picture. Like you said, Graham Hancock. Because even archaeologists go, well, at least he's addressing real stuff no one knows about. Sometimes they say that. And I'm like, yeah, we do that. And you have the truth also. I mean,
that's right.
What the fuck would you want that shit for?
It's the comforting lie instead of the complex, sometimes difficult truth.
Yeah. And it's crazy that if they did that the reality is we wouldn't be racist because as I've showed you many times, the DNA is moving all over the fucking place.
Yeah.
So what the fuck?
Yeah. So like the idea that we're separate people is kind of nonsense.
Yeah. It's like it's certainly we're more connected than we ever imagined, and we think, oh, no one ever moved around. Like John was saying, people were moving up and down the mountains constantly.
Yeah.
So even we think, oh, back then they just stayed in the valleys or the mountains. They never interacted. John's like, yeah, no, they totally interacted. Well, yeah, that's our opinion about how, which I know you've had a lot of enlightenment on, is how much this stuff is moving around.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's interesting to think, like, even over the expanse of time, how much people did move around and how much they interacted with neighboring communities and neighboring civilizations and neighboring groups, and it's just like, yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, we're more sedentary now.
Yeah, that's right.
Than people were back then.
Yeah, for sure.
It's wild. So yeah, I think it's pretty cool. But anyways, I appreciate you coming on and stuff, and
for sure.
I look forward to talking on your show next.
Sounds good. Right on.
Take care.
You too.
Hello, and welcome to my channel. I am Damien Marie AtHope. In the simplest terms, I am an atheist-humanist philosopher and prehistorical writer-researcher at DamienMarieAtHope.com. I am specifically an axiological atheist. An axiological atheism can be thought to involve ethical and value theory reasoned and moral argument driven apatheism, agnosticism, atheism, anti-theism, anti-religionism, secularism, and humanism. Axiological atheists can be understood as a value theory or a value science atheist. As an axiological atheism's ethically reasoned and constructive pro-humanity. I am an axiological thinker, value theorist. The science of goodness, worthiness, usefulness, valuableness, virtue, reliableness, accuracy, validity, morality, integrity, beneficialness, etc., etc. We axiologists have a value consciousness. And in general, we see the architecture of humanistic humanitarianism value in people that we see as dignity beings. Places and things are not. Axiology is a value theory. In its broadest sense, it involves areas of philosophy that are deemed to encompass some evaluative or evaluation aspect. Therefore, it crosses almost all domains in some way or another. Now for a more detailed terms as to what I am. I am an axiological atheist, an anti-theist, an anti-religionist, secularist, humanist, rationalist, writer, artist, poet, philosopher, advocate, activist with schooling in psychology, sociology, as well as I am an autodidact, self-taught in science, archaeology, anthropology, and philosophy. I promote science and am against pseudoscience, pseudohistory, pseudomorality, things that are found in religion.